Tracey Lockwood.
Hello, beautiful lights, and welcome to another episode of From a Medium's Perspective. Today, I have just an amazing guest for you. I can't wait to introduce her. She is an international tutor at the world's foremost college of psychic science, and that is Arthur Findlay College in Essex, England. She is a trance medium, a trance healer, and mentors people in developing their trance work. She is known for transfiguration, for color therapy and sound healing, animal communication, and she is just a fantastic teacher of psychic mediumship, both evidentiarily and also at the psychic end. I'm so pleased to introduce to you Helen Davita. Helen, how are you?
Thank you, Tracy.
So proud to have you here today.
I'm really thrilled to be back. I enjoyed it so much before. I really did. So it's a real honor.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. If you would like to be able to check her out during the show, you can find her website at helendavita.com. That's Helen, Helen, Davita, Davita.com. Sometimes you like to check out our guests. So there you go, helendavita.com. So
that's cool.
We met at Arthur Findlay College. And
we did. Yeah, it was fabulous. Absolutely fabulous connection.
Well, you know, there are just certain people that stick in your mind, and you are most definitely one of them.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I never forget that week. Well, it was a weekend, wasn't it? And it was fabulous. And the energy was great, but yeah, there's certain people you connect with, and we certainly made a great connection there.
Yes, and I'm just tickled to have you here. For our listeners, maybe explain to them, what is trance in general?
Yeah, trance in general is a really interesting area. Trance itself is going into an altered state of consciousness. And suppose you could say when you're asleep, you're in trance, or when you're semi-awake, you're in trance. There are various stages of consciousness, but trance within mediumship involves quite a bit more, and it involves altering the state of awareness so that you can allow the mind, a subconscious mind of the medium, not to interfere with the communication of an intelligence from the spirit world to do their work. So whether it's philosophy, whether it's trance speaking, or bringing through a loved one in trance, or whether it's healing, the main thing is the medium has to take the mind out of the process and not influence it. What we're aiming for with all forms of trance is absolutely no interference of the medium's mind. Very difficult to do that because the mind is the most powerful thing we have.
Yeah, and busy sometimes, yes.
But perhaps if I can describe it another way, a little bit more poetically,
sure,
it might make a bit more sense. And I think of it as breathing into the stillness of no thought. If you can imagine a moment where there is absolutely no thought in your mind, you're just breathing. Your body is just functioning, and you are completely still. You have transcended any conscious thought or control of the thoughts, and just in this beautiful moment of stillness, then you can just about say you are in the trance state for mediumship. Then, of course, your intention would be where it needs to be. So whether it's healing, whether it's speaking, whether it's art, whether you compose in trance, which is very rare but has been known, that's where it's going to go. But for me, breathing into the stillness of thought and having no thought, breathing into the stillness of no thought is sums it up.
That's a beautiful way to put that. I really like that, breathing into the stillness of thought. I I've always thought of it as the place where time stops. It's
Yeah.
almost like your brain just slows down. You would think being perceptive in mediumship, you would like enhance your brain wave and get to a really high vibration or something like that,
Yeah.
high frequency, but it's actually a calming, isn't it?
Generally, it is. I mean, there are reports of monks who chant themselves into trance, and the brain waves are working at a much faster rate than normal consciousness. Super alert. They're at what is considered to be a super alert state, and yet it
Oh,
takes them
interesting.
into the trance. And then, if you think of the Turkish whirling dervishes and the physical activity that has to increase and increase and increase to the point where they reach that point of consciousness on a spiritual level rather than consciousness on a thought level, and connect with their spirituality and their belief system. So it's an interesting thing, the speed that the brainwaves are working at with trance. And of course, we could take our brainwaves to a state that, if we agreed where it would be for deep trance, and of course we don't have to have a belief in the spirit world and we can still be there. So it's really the presence of the spirit world, and measuring the brain just tells us what your brainwaves is doing.
Yeah, yeah. I think that stillness of mind or sense of time stopping allows that awareness to expand into the subtle realm. How would you
Yeah.
differentiate self hypnosis from trance?
Well, they're very similar in many ways. You're going again into this altered state of awareness. There are many similarities in altering the consciousness and controlling the focus within your mind that cross over between hypnotherapy and trance. And certainly when you are taking yourself into an altered state of awareness, many of the signs and symptoms are very similar to what you'd experience in a hypnotherapy session. For example, if I needed to give up smoking and went to a hypnotherapist, I might experience, as they take me into the hypnotherapy state, some rapid eye movement, my eyes might water a bit, the skin tone might change, the pulse rate might change, the muscles might twitch a bit like when you're watching the TV and your leg suddenly shoots out. All those things happen as the brain waves change and the consciousness changes. But it wouldn't be anything to do with trance mediumship. It's just purely an observation of physiological signs within us when we change that consciousness. So there are some things that cross over, but the intention is different, and where it's going and the end product will be different.
Yeah, I was intrigued by what C.W. Ledbetter wrote on the topic at the late 1800s. He considered it a violent access of the subconscious to use something artificial like counting or focusing on a mandala or chanting a mantra, basically like an intense focus to stupefy the mind.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? And I'm not quite sure why it would be considered violent. I mean, certainly in a lot of trance sessions, counting backwards, and they're all really good techniques, not just for trance, but for hypnotherapy as well, of focusing the thought away from random thought.
Right.
And also taking it away from controlling the situation.
Yes. I don't know. It's just interesting. I was just curious what you would say too about it.
It's certainly interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. I guess self-induced hypnotherapy might be closer. And then you have guided meditations that open up ways to access things.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly you can go to some very nice altered state places in the guided meditations. But again, the intention is different. So
yeah, the intention. I think that's what it comes down to. Yes.
Yeah. Certainly interesting what Ledbetter had to say. It sounds quite dramatic, doesn't it? This violent
I think
assault on the mind.
He was also lumping using drugs or alcohol or any mind altering anything to
Yeah,
access the
yeah.
subconscious, because he felt that it didn't enhance the growth of the spirit. But by going into trance naturally, learning the discipline of concentration and meditation and contemplation, that you enhance the evolvement of your soul.
Yeah, and also I think we have to look at the social conditions of the day. In Ledbetter's day, amongst the middle classes in particular and the aristocracy, there was a big problem with drugs, and one in particular, laudanum, big issue. So there'd have been a lot of problems with addiction with it, that I could understand the focus on using an artificial, a chemical substitute to alter the brain and the mind, being
Yeah, and
something
today,
not to encourage too much.
and today people are using ketamine or ayahuasca or whatever to quickly switch them. And somebody who had indulged in that, which for me would be a nightmare. I just have no interest in alternate substances. I see enough and hear
Yeah,
enough and feel enough without any help. Thank you very
yeah,
much, please. But he was saying that, and I'll protect his identity, but he was saying that he felt like once you had opened up, that it was now your responsibility to be able to get back there on your own and not be dependent on that. And maybe that's too something like using a technique initially to be able to access that part of yourself, but then not become reliant on that technique forever. Just it becomes more and more natural as you develop. What do you think about that?
yeah. I think it does, and I mean, certainly in my own experience of working with the altered states of awareness, they've been very pleasant experiences, and it's in those moments of the consciousness transcending ordinary conscious or subconscious thought, controlling the situation, where you're just sort of either coming in of it or going out of it, where you experience those great flashes of inspiration. It can be a very significant time where suddenly you get the great idea, and that doesn't have to involve anything sort of
Yes, yes.
herbal or otherwise.
How would you differentiate trance healing from healing, or trance mediumship from mediumship? What's so special about trance?
Yeah, I know, because you don't have to opt for trance. It's an option, and it may be a way that you feel very comfortable working. How would you differentiate? It's interesting because, if we're talking of energy that heals, if we're talking of healing, whether it's Reiki or whether it's trance or
Uh-huh.
whether it's another organization's training in healing, it's all the same energy. It's the same source, it's the same healing intention and the same source of energy that will, facilitate the healing process. Why trance? And I've often asked myself that question. Now, the great healer in the UK, who was very well known throughout the world, was Harry Edwards. And it's on record in a number of places that he wasn't a big fan of trance healing. He just used to do his spiritual healing. And his actual reason for that was that he felt, why rely on the intelligence of another when you can just connect directly to it? And I could see his point, to be honest, but as part of that journey, trying to differentiate between why trance healing, why healing, for example, in my own experience, I felt that there are intelligences, healing intelligences, that are ready and willing to work, and clearly the experts in this area. And even though I can be a channel for healing, if there's somebody that can give me a hand and make it much more effective,
Oh, yes.
then that's wonderful. So it works for me. It might not work for everyone. And healing is healing. It's intelligent. So it's not one is better than the other. I think it's really how you like to work.
I wonder,
And
Yeah, I was
I
just
think,
thinking.
yeah. Sorry.
So
Yeah.
no, sorry. I was just thinking that it sort of comes down to focus again. You know,
Yeah.
I had like just a snippet of exposure to trance healing when I was studying at Arthur Findlay, and the difference that was demonstrated or pointed out to me was that like my natural instinct was to scan the body psychically, like
Yeah. Yeah.
to figure out what's messed up and send energy to that point, maybe calling on my guides or angels to assist. And
Yeah.
it was Minister Stella Upton that was uh,
Yeah.
teaching that class, and she's highly
Wonderful.
sensitive, as you and are, and she came over and she
Yes.
said she could feel what I was doing, and she said, she said, that's inappropriate. She said, you connect upward and allow it to flow through you. And when I did that, my partner, the person that was my victim, you know, she opened her eyes because she thought that I had ignored the teacher and had come around and stood in front of her and touched her knees, which is actually what was hurting on her. But I wasn't there. And so that was the active spirit through me. But I was completely unaware that her
Yeah.
knees were hurting or that, there was any energy working with her knees.
Yeah, yeah. It is interesting, isn't it? That I know there are many healing disciplines where you would scan for energy, and that's quite an interesting exercise, as well as it can be very useful in some cases with healing. The only problem is if you look at it from the spiritual and the trance point of view, is once you become aware, supposing I scan someone, I become aware, they've got I don't know, I feel very drawn and I feel the energy draws me and it doesn't feel good around the shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what I do, I've put it in my mind that they might have a shoulder problem. And no matter how much I try to quieten my mind, my subconscious is saying, I hope her shoulder gets better.
Oh,
And
so
so,
it creates like a resistance almost to the end result.
yeah, I'm actually creating a desire and a thought within myself. So it really can hamper it in a sense, because I'm not able to go deep enough into the trance then and clear my thoughts, because what keeps coming back is I hope her shoulder stops
Right,
hurting.
right. So it forms like an impedance to the flow of spirit. Yeah, very
It,
interesting.
it, it could do. Now, some people, everyone's mind, everyone's consciousness is unique, and
Yes.
how they can access that and change it. I know in me, because I'd just be too nosy once I got an idea
Me too.
that that it would interfere with my ability to get the mind out of the way so the spirit can do their job. So it doesn't work very well for me, although I do quite like scanning. But I tend, if I was to do that, I'd be using that with a different type of healing for a different reason. I find scanning more beneficial when I do animal healing than I do human. But
Oh,
because I
interesting.
do less trance healing of animals, I do some, but quite often, it's not appropriate to be in trance surrounded by some, wild
Yeah,
donkeys or something. Yeah.
right, right. Do you think too that I was just thinking of the link between trance mediumship and physical
Yeah.
mediumship, and wondering that in the healing arena, if being in trance allows for a more physical benefit or a more physical transformation to occur. What do you have to say
Yeah.
about that?
I mean, this certainly does happen. It certainly does happen. There's a very fine line, isn't there, with trance and physical mediumship. One is mental mediumship, where we're working through the mind, and the mind of the spirit intelligence and the mind of the medium, and there's a cooperation for the medium to get their mind out the way. But with physical, it's about using energy. It's about forming energy to create, to heal. So it's a different form of mediumship. One's mental, one's purely physical. But very often we have this physical trance healing effect. I've seen it many times. I've experienced it. And yeah, it is. It's a crossover. And how you can quite define it. The problem is we always try to categorize these things.
Oh, yeah. And it's like a continuum, really, you know.
I think it is a continuum. And if you're the kind of medium where you can be a channel for physical energy, for physical mediumship and physical results, then certainly that leap from the deep trance state where you are sitting and just being a channel of intention, and if you also have that ability to create, you know, and be that channel of physical energy, they can come together, and they do come together, and we see some wonderful results.
Yeah, yeah. I have very meager examples to share, but while I was at Arthur Findlay, like my whole life happened there in the time that I was there.
You never went anywhere else.
But when I was there, after one of the services, and it's just where this occurred, they had healers there, and this one woman asked if she could work with me, and I didn't know what was going on, but a physical ailment, that it was a neck injury that had caused me tremendous pain for 7 years without relief, was instantly removed. And I've had no trouble since 2010 with that. So
isn't that amazing?
Yeah. It is amazing. So that's what I was wondering about the trance and the physical. I wondered if it was a more direct way to allow spirit to work through people, so that because our minds are out of the way.
I agree with you on that, and I think because the minds are out the way, we're letting the intelligence, you know, work with that energy, and they know what to do. It's like, I sometimes explain to my students, it's a bit like if your appendix bursts, you don't rush to the GP. You call for a paramedic, or you get straight to hospital because you need a surgeon.
Absolutely.
So, you know, you're not going to sort of go to the person who's then going to refer you on. You want to go straight to the expert.
Yeah, get it done.
And if someone's going to save your life, it's probably going to be the expert. And so I tend to think of those intelligent beings in the spirit world, they're often referred to as spirit doctors or spirit healers, as the experts. So if I can get myself out the way, I can intend that healing and be that channel for healing. I can hand over to them and not interfere, and hopefully we get the best result.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to touch on that in the second half of the show as well. But just one more thing on sort of differentiating different types of things. How would you describe spiritual healing?
Yeah, I mean, spiritual healing is such a beautiful thing to do. And I think it is really the jewel in the crown of all the spiritual arts, if you want to call them arts. But
yes,
I really do, because I think it's something we all do. I think it's innate in all of us, and I think we're all capable of it. And spiritual healing is that making of connections. It's making bridges, and it's bridging to nature. It's bridging to the patient or the situation. It's bridging to the spirit, and it's bridging to yourself, and allowing all those bridges to connect up, and then just be a beautiful channel for this life force that's in everything and around us to flow. And within that flow, there is the intelligence to heal. That's how I see it.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's just perfect timing, because our music is coming in for the second half of the hour. If you'd like to reach Helen Davita in the future, you can find her at helendavita.com, and we'll be right back.
Now, back to our show, From a Medium's Perspective, with host, Reverend Tracey Lockwood.
Welcome back. If you missed the first half of the show or you'd like to listen to any of our other many episodes, you can find them on YouTube. Just go to YouTube and put in Medium Tracey Lockwood, and you'll find a plethora of things to trigger your imagination there. And if you're interested in private tutoring or in mediumship certification or in classes that can help develop your abilities, you can contact me via mediumtracylockwood.com. Meanwhile, we're going to get back to our discussion and interesting conversation here with Helen Davita. Helen, welcome back.
Hi, thank you.
We were just finishing up a little bit about the differences between trance healing, regular healing, and spiritual healing. Do you think that you could sort of encapsulate really briefly the high point of that for each of those: trance healing, regular healing, and spiritual healing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the difficult. What really do we mean by regular healing? Conventional healing?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, certainly from my point of view, I look at it all as an energetic thing. So, whether it's using medicine or whether it's using surgery or whether it's using psychological techniques, we're changing thought, we're changing energy somewhere, even if it's chemically, we're changing it in regular healing.
Yes.
In spiritual healing, we're allowing the energy, the life force to flow through us to where we intend it to go. And that's what we're doing. We're becoming this channel just to intend the intelligence of the spirit energy, spiritual energy, the life force. And with trance healing, we're taking that to a level where our consciousness is less aware and hopefully unaware, but that's very difficult to do. Mm-hmm. But we're much less aware, and we're inviting an intelligence from the spirit world, if you like, an expert in healing, to take over the process of moving that energy for healing rather than us just being a clear channel. So in a sense, it's all energy. One involves a spirit healer, a spirit doctor, which is the trance. One would involve just being a pure channel for the healing life force, and the other would involve, conventional medical techniques and perhaps even certain medications.
Oh, that's
how I would see the difference.
Yeah, that's very clear and beautifully said. Thank you so much. How did you know that you were a trance healer? How did you discover that ability?
It's interesting because I'd been working since my late teens with various meditation techniques, and I became interested and trained in transcendental meditation. So I was used to sitting and allowing my place of no thought to arrive on a regular basis. So I kind of got hooked on that, really. With the healing, later on into my 20s, I went on a weekend course for Reiki, which, interestingly enough, very few people had heard of it then. It was not very well known at all. And if you mentioned the word Reiki in healing circles, nobody knew what it was. And it was like this new thing. And I was being taught by a Japanese nun.
Interesting.
Yeah, she had a direct link to the founder of Reiki. And so it was a very pure form of healing. It didn't involve the westernized of symbols and stuff like that. That came later. But I went on that course and there was a kind of transformation, an opening up, because it was just pure healing in the Japanese, pure spiritual healing in the Japanese tradition. No different to if you do healing through the major organizations, certainly in the UK. pure spiritual healing it was. And there was this wonderful opening up of awareness. And I started to do quite a lot of it, just for friends and family and animals. And I was working full time then. And I became aware that I would lose awareness. And I only become aware that you lose awareness, don't you?
Yes, I know what you mean.
Come back,
Yes.
But I suddenly would lose time. I would realize I'd lost 40 minutes somewhere. And I didn't worry too much about it. I just thought, I hope I wasn't embarrassing or anything, And then after a while, before I would go into this state of losing awareness of time as I was healing, as I was sitting for healing, I would feel the presence of someone else with me. And I would get this sense of them moving around. And very often the person who was receiving the healing said, "Who was that with you? Who touched me there? Or who did this? Or who moved my leg?" And I hadn't touched the patient whatsoever. In fact, I sat on a chair the other side of the room most of the time. But so I became aware that there was a presence working with me. And I welcomed that presence because it felt really good. But what would happen was I'd sit for the channel of healing, and then the presence would come in, and I'd allow myself to go into that space of no thought. And it just continued like that. And it wasn't really until much later in life, when I was working more regularly in the spiritual field, and then later at the Arthur Findlay College, I realized that what I was doing, people were calling it trance healing. For me, it was just healing.
Right.
So I realized, but I'd also started to work a lot more with other forms of trance. So with writing and with speaking in trance. And I was sitting, with a couple of groups I worked with, and we'd have the trance speaking. So I became familiar of an intelligence separate from me that could blend and take over the process, so long as I got out the way.
Yes. Yeah. And, some people get nervous. They're like, well, I don't want anyone taking over my body. But it's not like possession, where there's a negative energy violating the boundaries of someone, against their will. This is a higher vibrational consciousness, being, counsel, whatever, that has infinite intelligence and far beyond our capacity, and would not create harm for us or for anyone else. Yeah.
I mean, nobody can enter your body, apart from a surgeon, but it just doesn't happen. And certainly the intelligence from the spirit world doesn't enter your body. We are electromagnetic energy fields, and so are they. And there's a blending. There's a blending at a very deep level. If you go really deep into this, it's like the souls are harmonizing. There's nothing gets in your body. Nobody can possess you and take over you. Only your own mind can control that. But I've never, unfortunately, Hollywood's had a lot to answer for with horror movies and stuff.
Oh gosh.
And so, fear breeds fear, but there's absolutely nothing. It's so loving. It's so pure. It's so, I would say it is so natural. To me, it feels very natural and
transcendental, for real. Yes.
Absolutely transcendental. And I have to say, if there was any moment where it scared me, I'd be the first one out the door,
Right.
There's just nothing to be scared of. And to be honest, I really don't think anyone would want to come into my body.
Silly lady. Well, how would you recommend that someone develop it? How does someone develop that?
Yeah, I mean, it's always best if you can develop in a group and with a teacher who can guide you and can also say, well, that's enough for tonight. You know, you're adjusting. You're adjusting your consciousness and, you know, you're changing your state of mind. And, you know, nothing horrible can happen. But, you know, if you're not used to it, it's good to have someone there. And although you can develop it by sitting on your own, it's not impossible. A group which is very harmonious and a teacher who is aware of how these things work is ideal. That's the ideal. And
yes.
I do have people come to me who have no groups and nobody around them who could sit for them. And, you know, we can do something with that. And I had to learn myself. I didn't have any group at the time as I was developing. It just occurred pretty much spontaneously. And then I learned a lot more in later life about what was happening and, you know, educated myself then. But it's not impossible to develop on your own, but the ideal would be a group, even if it's just one person who sits for you.
Yes.
It will help.
Well,
and of course, the other aspect is that their good intention to sit for you is giving you energy to develop and giving you a security net to allow it to explore and develop further.
Yes, and two people, you know, there's that biblical reference where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst. And I think it's an energetic thing when we get around somebody else with the same intent. There's I don't know, incremental or like a enhancement of the that vibration is that facilitates the purpose.
Yeah, and I mean, it definitely does. And because it's energy, it travels. I mean, you know, there are even people who have trance SKYPE groups and it works.
Yes.
It's wonderful. I mean, obviously, if you can meet and form that harmonious group, that's great. But if you can't, there are ways. But that definitely does make a difference when you've got the energy, the power of someone else with their good intention. You know, we call them batteries. They're the energy givers.
Yes, yeah. You were talking about the presence and sort of alluded to our chemist or healer guides. Tell us a little bit about trance guides.
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny area because we're all naturally nosy and want to know all about them, but it's one of those areas where less is more. And you know, rather like here, we're specialized in certain areas. You and I are both mediumistic. Mm-hmm. We both teach. You know, we both do things with media, and we obviously have a particular skill set or an intention or a desire, and it must be the same in the spirit world. You know, the intelligence continues on. If you believe in life after death, you know, I don't believe you would then get to the spirit world and say, oh, well, you know, I was really interested in this. Now I'm nothing. You know, you have skills. Some believe that spirit doctors, some of them would have been doctors in this life when they were in this incarnation. I haven't always found that myself, but I have found it as well. So I think it's a question of just allowing what arises to arise and just accept it without trying to overthink it. One of the difficulties is if you do try and find out the story of who your guides are too much, you get caught up in their story and then your mind starts to get interested. And I've had that happen.
Yeah.
And I've realized that I've had to go back to square one and I've started to create the story because I've been too nosy and my mind has come in.
Yeah.
If I keep my mind out, then I know it's the presence of spirit. I feel it. So for me, these guides, these healing guides, I like to know by their sense of presence and the sense of blending when I go for the trance. If I want to get active with the mind, then it becomes clairvoyant and I'm seeing a certain face, a certain way of dress, a certain culture, perhaps a different skin color. And I'm starting to think about it, and I'm starting to think, well, hang on, I didn't think you were a Tibetan monk. I thought you were a Native American Indian chief. And suddenly, and suddenly I'm in this whole realm of fantasy, and my mind's come in and created it.
Yeah.
So it really is less is more.
I was wondering too, specifically in the realm of trance work, whether it's trance mediumship, channeling, healing, or even art, whether we go through different phases as we develop our intuitive abilities, starting with just instinct and then going through intuition and then the more psychic aspects and then more mediumship and then sort of the channeling comes at the end. I wonder if it's a phase that is better suited, because I find our guides fascinating, but what I find is that when I discover a new guide, it's interesting to me, but when I'm actively working as a medium, I'm not specifically aware of who's doing what unless I choose to focus on it, which I can definitely do and identify them. But it's more like you're talking about as you move that along that spectrum of intuitive development or expression, it does less important because it is a resonance. It's interesting. I hadn't really thought about it until you said that.
It is interesting, isn't it? And I think when you start developing, and sometimes I see this with students now, and it reminds me, it takes me right back. There's this great need to know who your guide is. And it's like it's really important. And you think, well, perhaps it is important. It is, it is a strange world.
Yeah. And to know that you're supported and that it's real, that you can perceive that person and other people can pick up that same energy without being told about them around you.
I think so. And one of the most important exercises, I think, in trance is understanding and recognizing the blending. And so I quite often do an exercise with students where they will go into the altered state and they will intend their philosophers and guides for wisdom to blend, not speak or anything or do anything, but just to blend with them and become slightly aware of how they feel, and then to bring in the ones who work with them for healing and sense the different energy. So you get to know them by their energy in the blending rather than a story or an identity or a culture or a religion.
Right. Yeah, and not something to, oh, my guide is so-and-so and he has this and that, like a left brain kind of intellectual discourse on who works with you, which kind of cheapens the experience. But experientially, it's interesting to know. But I love that concept of, it's something that happened naturally for me, and it sounds like for you too. But I hadn't really identified that it was something that had happened because.
And I think you're right. You do go through these phases, and it is part of the development. And I think if all of a sudden, from having no awareness of spiritual work to just suddenly having this massive opening up of spiritual development in one moment, and a separate intelligence than you blending with you, well, I'd be running to the nearest psychiatric hospital. That would just be too much.
Yeah, I think our mind couldn't adapt, sort of like our bodies and our concepts, our perception and our bodies have to adapt to. You wouldn't think you'd have to adapt to physical, to psychic dimension or subtle realms or whatever, but I'm sure you've seen people wrestle with vertigo or having difficulty grounding or dizziness or well, that's dizziness, vertigo, or
nausea is
something.
quite a common one, isn't it?
Or become reliant on physical things like tingling or something to indicate the presence. But I think that's how they train us, don't you think, to help us?
I think so. And I think you're kind of sort of giving little tasters, but also you have the control in this to say, I'm staying where I am for now. I don't want to develop this further. I'll move on when I'm ready. So, and that's always respected, I believe. It's not, not ever made to do anything without your consent or your blessing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Helen, we have come to the end of another juicy hour. Thank you so much. This was just wonderful to have you on the show.
I always love it. I love talking to you, Tracey, and it's a great show. Thank you so much.
Oh, you are more than welcome. And I want to thank everyone that chose to listen today, and remind you that it's never inappropriate to be kind, and without integrity, you have nothing. See you next week.